Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the University of Michigan Club of Washington, D.C., my name is David Koss, and I'm a member of the board. This conversation is being recorded, and people should use the Q&A feature to ask any questions of the panelists, and they will be posed as time permits. We hope you enjoyed, or maybe we should say you were moved by the Arena Stage film, The 51st State. The film, together with the upcoming conversation, is being presented as a commemoration of Black History Month. For those of you who may not be aware, the University of Michigan and Arena Stage has had a long and warm relationship. Back in 1967, the play The Great White Hope had its world premiere at Arena Stage, starring Michigan alumnus James Earl Jones. Long before he was Darth Vader, he was in The Great White Hope at Arena Stage and then in the movie. Dear Evan Hansen, probably the most important theatrical event created by Michigan alumni since Death of a Salesman, had its world premiere at Arena Stage in 2015. And the list goes long, a lot longer than that. I could mention Brittany Coleman and Pajama Game and others, but I'll stop there. Molly, before you introduce and enter into conversation with Kayleen and Sam, please tell us how you and Arena pivoted during the pandemic from a producer of live theater to a producer of video and live streamed events, and how you came to choose and develop the 51st State.
Great, thanks, David, and so happy to be here for the program. You know, at Arena, probably a week after the pandemic started, I just said, oh my gosh, how are we going to stay connected to our audiences and our artists and our staff? And I just thought, okay, we got to go online. And so we started a program called Molly's Salon that we do on a weekly basis, which is a talk show with artists and community leaders. And then one morning I woke up and realized, as I was reading the Washington Post, that the Washington Post tells stories in thumbnails in a beautiful way. And why aren't we doing this in the theater? And so that was the impetus for May 22nd, 2020, which was our first film. And at the same time, our community engagement program was doing a film called Inside Voices with our young artists, which is really a sophisticated, wonderful film. But May 20th, 2020 was really about the pandemic and its effect on metropolitan area, all on May 20th, May 22nd, 2020. Now, 3 days later, George Floyd was murdered and the world changed again. And so the 51st State was really driven by that idea, is here we are in this incredible moment of racial upheaval and recognition of a racial reckoning. And so is the city of Washington, D.C. After all it's gone through, it's been pretty brutalized. So the idea was to interview 10 people. You all just saw the film, so I'll talk to Sam and Colleen about that in a minute. And then we just have gone on. We've now done, I think, 5 or 6 films, either co-producing or producing them. Sam and I will talk later about a film that he's working on now for Arena. We're also doing one called Indigenous Earth Voices, with all Indigenous artists about their relationship to the earth from around the country and Canada. There's lots of different ways that we're able to speak to more and larger groups of people. Our community engagement program, our young people, now on something like Camp Arena Stage, we had campers as far away as Bogota, Colombia. We could never have had that kind of reach before in the physical form of the theater. And so we've had a very strong relationship to online work, and our numbers have been kind of incredible. 900% more people have watched videos on Arena than before the pandemic. So that shows how the reach is. But I want to turn to Sam and Colleen to talk to them about the 51st State. I have a question for you first, Colleen. Will you talk about who your interviewee was and how it was interviewing him?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here. And as a former theater purist, who told my husband for years, it's only theater if people are live in the room breathing the same air. Well, look who was wrong. It's been extraordinarily exciting and really life-changing to do this work, and all the more life-changing in terms of who you assigned me, Molly Smith. So this gentleman who asked to remain anonymous, whom I have great respect for because he clearly had views that were quite different from sort of your typical theater going DC audience, and certainly your typical playwright. My big job here was to, meet and greet, of course, over the phone, and to make him feel comfortable enough to speak from the heart. And he did, and a lot of it was very hard for me to hear. But we have to hear these points of view to understand, what the issues are out here and how people are making sense of things. And then as a playwright, I felt obliged to find ways to connect him to the audience so that they wouldn't immediately dismiss him. I wanted there to be points of empathy, points of connection, so that when he begins to sort of share more of his political views, you kind of go, oh, because that's how it is in life. You meet somebody, you hit it off, and then you discover, oh, you don't think like I think at all. Yeah, and I know, Molly, you still owe me a drink for that one.
Once this crazy pandemic is over, we will do that, Colleen. And just for our audiences, Colleen and Sam are both really sophisticated theater makers. Colleen with her work as a playwright, as an educator, as a thinker in the American theater, and Sam for his work as a composer, as a educator, as a playwright, as a director. Sam, you've just ended up being like someone who's able to do it all. And I'd love for you to talk about how it was for you directing the two pieces that you did in the 51st state.
It was marvelous. I was working with two actors that I love. I directed Go, and I directed Gary Perkins in that, and then I directed No More Running rather, with Justin Weeks, and it was wonderful and a little strange because we rehearsed via Zoom, so we never got to be in person until we were on set the day of the shoot. So that was both strange and sort of exciting. It was really cool to see how the performances translated on film on set, and how it was slightly different than the rehearsals we had via Zoom. So that was interesting part of the process. And of course, getting COVID tested a few days prior, which is, part of this new world, and making sure that we were safe and everyone around us was safe. But more than anything, it was really the contents of the monologues was, those two pieces in particular, I felt a very strong personal connection to. And I know both of the actors felt a personal sort of immediate response and love for those pieces too. So that just made the process all the better.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. Our first film, probably 8,000 or 9,000 people saw it. The second film, The 51st State, I think it's something like 50,000 people saw it. Now, that's also because we had a relationship with WTOP and they put it out as well. And some people probably looked in and looked back out or whatever. It still had sticky eyes on it. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me because a friend of mine saw the film. She lives on the West Coast. She's from Alaska. I knew her from there. And she watched it and she came back to me and she says, I don't think Washington, D.C. should be a state. I said,
Interesting.
Kate, you're one of my best friends. You think that Washington, D.C. should be a state? Shouldn't be a state? And she says, no, not really. I think it needs to remain a district. And I said, you felt that after seeing the film? And she said, yeah. And then when the insurrection happened, she called me on the phone and she said, for God's sake, why didn't Muriel Bowser get out the National Guard? And I said, Kate, we're not a state. And she went, beep, beep. Okay, I think Washington, D.C. needs to be a state. And I thought, oh my God. Colleen, what do you think the effect of the film was on you, on other people that had seen it? What kind of conversations did you have afterwards?
Well, it was May, and I hadn't been talking to a lot of people, quite frankly. I'd sort of been, in my little hidey hole. And so it opened the door for a lot of interesting conversations and people really feeling, people really grateful to have people representing their points of view. Just as Sam was speaking, how the pieces resonated, it felt good to have someone speaking the things that you were feeling, the frustration, the anger, the sense of uncertainty. So I think that range of monologues really helped people to understand that there was no one right way to be responding to this, and to see how complex the issue is, human beings are, COVID is, and this whole process that we're using to create the art. So it was very layered and allowed people, I think, to dip into deeper conversations than they'd been having.
That's so great. Sam, one of the interesting things is you were directing on this project and now you're part of Arena Riffs at Arena Stage, where we have commissioned 3 different composers and theater makers to create 10 to 30 minute long musical pieces that are fully filmed. And talk about that process, because you're one of the artists on that.
Yeah, so my Arena Riffs piece is called The Freewheeling Insurgents. And fun fact, it's inspired by Bob Dylan's album, The Freewheeling Bob Dylan. So which some people may or may not get, but I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. We actually have the same birthday too. So the film is about a cadre of hip hop theater artists who are meeting up to rehearse in Rock Creek Park during this time when you can no longer really do live theater. And it explores themes like violent versus nonviolent protest and love and mental health. But more than anything, it's a love letter to the spirit of the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's an elegy for theater. So yeah, we were talking a little bit before the event started. And I mean, I'm just so excited about what, like the footage I've seen so far. Has, looks great, and I don't want to give too much of the film away, but we got a chance to sort of bring Arena Stage into the story in a really cool way, and I can't wait for folks to see what we have cooking.
That's so great. So stay tuned for that. And I think we launch our first one in about 2 weeks. The Bengsons, who are a wonderful writing duo. He's a composer. I mean, they really are fantastic. And I've just seen a rough cut of their film, and it's really exciting. And then Psalms is next. And then we have a third one as well. So for those of you listening, go on to arenastage.org and see what's happening. Colleen, should we share your news about what you've been commissioned to do? We haven't done it publicly, but I think sometimes it's fun to do a sneak peek for people who are on something like this. And I'm so happy to welcome you to the powerplay cycle. And will you talk about your commission at Arena?
Yes, well, this is very exciting and very, of course, anything that's really exciting is also terrifying. Would you agree with that, Sam?
Absolutely, 100%.
So Arena Stage has commissioned me to write a play on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I can't think of a bigger honor. And I can't think of a bigger canvas. And I can't think of a more inspiring person to be writing about at this time. I've started my research and it's just been fantastic. So, I'm looking forward to, and I, every morning I talk myself down. I say, you can do this, you can do this. And the great thing about writing about her is that she had to talk herself down. She had to take, one step at a time. Just her mom told her, always be a lady. And by that, I mean, don't waste energy getting angry or getting upset. And that's been something that I've, kept in mind. So she's inspirational. She's got so much that is relevant in terms of the situations we find ourselves in. And it's an awesome project. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we're thrilled to have you, Colleen. I mean, your writing, you always are astute in terms of character, and also you write a heck of a plot. And I think this is going to be exciting because you're focused on Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the 1990s. And I think that may be a story that hasn't quite been uncovered yet. The power play cycle covers 25 different decades of American life from 1776 till the present decade. And Colleen is the 1990s with Justice Ginsburg, who was a big fan of all of the arts and used to come to Arena to most opening nights. I mean, pretty darned extraordinaire.
Yeah.
I've met so many theater people who met her because she was that curious and that outgoing. So it's awesome to know how her reach in DC is amazing.
It really is. Because sometimes she'd come backstage and talk to the actors. And of course, everybody was thrilled about that. Washington, D.C. is one of those cities that the Secret Service is often in the back with their wires as official Washington is in the house. And, we are in a city that the theater is actually able to speak to power. And I think that makes a huge difference for us as theater artists, because theater artists always want meaning in their lives and they want their work to mean something. Sam, what do you think we're going to carry with us, and what will you personally carry with you as out of the pandemic, and what kind of moments of joy are you finding within that?
Yeah, so one thing that I'm certainly going to carry with me out of this pandemic is sort of knowing when to press pause, and knowing that, that pressing pause is sort of a necessary thing. As artists, a lot of times in this country, we're so used to sort of just going all the time, because a lot of artists don't get the support from the government that other artists in other countries do. So we're always sort of in hustle mode. But this pandemic has really emphasized for me just the need to take it easy, to go out into nature, which is one thing that I've started to do since the pandemic started, that has now become sort of a part of my artistic practice. So that's certainly one thing that I'll be taking with me as we ease our way back into a sense of normal life.
Beautiful. So Colleen, how about for you? What are you going to carry out of these days?
Well, as Sam referred to, I've got to have my walk. I've got to have my walk. Getting outside is extraordinarily important to me daily. But I think the thing I'm going to take away from this is flexibility. I retired during this pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And I always assumed that, when I retire, I will set up a daily schedule for myself. And that really did not work. I needed that sort of in keeping with what Sam said about taking a pause. There were some days I did not want to work. There were some days I didn't want to face the computer screen. There were some days when I worked late at night instead of early in the morning. And I gradually came to the point of view of, you know what, this is not, you can't make this a regimen. You have to allow yourself flexibility. You have to allow yourself to respond to all of the stuff you're getting on the news, to all of the stuff with your family. All that has got to feed into your work, and you have to take care of yourself. And as Sam said, that sort of go, 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 you have to really know when to be able to step back, listen to yourself, put on some floaty music and just deep breathe. So one of the things I will be grateful for is that that attention to self, and that attention to being productive without being in a vice or in a box, just allowing yourself to produce.
So interesting. You know, as artists, we're really synthesizers of the world. And what both of you are talking about, whether it's about being in nature or paying attention to your own specific cycles, which is what nature does too, right? Means that what comes into one as an artist can be clarified in a different way, because there's either the time through meditation in nature or the time through personal meditation to be able to get to the gold in one way or another. I mean, it's interesting. I hope as we come out of it, we don't move into faster and faster and faster. That's what I hope. I hope we're in a little bit of a slow move now. Now, I know we might have some questions. The murder of George Floyd was a spark for this project. How do you think this project has changed in its impact or meaning in the subsequent months? Sam or Colleen?
Wow. You know what? I have not watched the entire piece in full since we've premiered it, since I watched it a few times right after we premiered it. But the piece initially made me really think about the intersection of the fight for DC statehood, and then the fight for just the recognizing the value of Black lives. So I mean, it feels like that's sort of an evergreen sort of topic, both of those things, and how this piece lives at that intersection feels like it continues to get more pertinent until DC becomes a state. It feels like the force of this film is going to become more potent. Yeah, and I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, but it feels like it's sort of like a avalanche, right? There's a momentum that the piece has, and it's not surprising that it's been viewed however many thousands of times. I mean, because it's a pertinent piece that whose time has come.
Colleen, how about for you?
Well, because I'm way older than some and tend to be forgetful, sometimes I said, let me watch this before tonight. And so I watched this afternoon, and I think the importance of this film has actually increased manyfold. First of all, you get a chance to see footage of the Black Lives Matter protests and compare that to what conservatives were saying was the destruction of property and the violence of the Black Lives Matter protests. They are not. You have visual evidence of people just walking, of people approaching the police with their hands up, don't shoot. You have visual evidence of the fact that there were children there and grandmothers there and so forth. So again, visual evidence that disproves a lot of the lies when there were comparisons between January 6th and the Black Lives Matter movement. And seeing these monologues and hearing people who are residents has to again take you back to January 6th. The residents of this city had their city violated. And they were handcuffed and restricted and could do nothing to stop it. They are not a state. So I think this is a very, very powerful way to disprove a lot of the lies that were told after January 6th. And people need to see this and reconsider, just as your friend did in Alaska.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, it's a snapshot in time, and yet it's like you said, Sam, it's a tsunami that just continues. It is a tsunami. And it just takes it and really focuses it here in Washington, D.C., because you could do many films around the United States, whether you were in Chicago and New York or Minneapolis, about this moment in time. And they would all be different. And yet I think they would all carry with them the same message. And Colleen and Sam, I think it is that Black Lives Matter, the protests are necessary, and the protests were peaceful. And you really see our own government turning on their people within this.
Yes.
And may it not happen again.
Yes. Yeah.
Another question, how do you expect Arena Stage and the landscape of American theater to change? Given COVID, Black Lives Matter, We See You, White American Theater, the election. How do you think we can come back from this, and what do you expect? What shifts or trends have you noticed in the theater community at large? That's a good and really big question.
That's a great question. So two things. I think this, how we've embraced technology now as theater artists. I know for myself personally, I'm more of a Luddite. So, or at least I was prior to the pandemic. And now I didn't know what Zoom was before the pandemic, right? Like a lot of people. So I think how we, the means by which we deliver our stories to audiences is going to be influenced by technology, and that some version of that will stay. I also think there's going to be a sort of a retreat to intimacy and sort of quieter, simpler stories too. So I think we'll get sort of more adventurous with technology. And then I think some of the stories will actually become sort of smaller and more intimate and more human, because that's also what we need. So I think there's going to sort of be like a swelling of our artistry. And then I do think it's going to affect even the types of stories that we tell as we move forward.
Great. Colleen?
I had a strong image when you asked that question of children, when you put them all together in a space and they have to sort of figure out where they are, how to relate to the other children there, or if you put a bunch of toddlers in a space together, they have to sort of figure things out. Some of them cry, some of them stand back, some of them rush forward. I think we're going to have to learn how to be live with each other again. And I think, We See You, White American Theater, and Black Lives Matter, and intimacy training, and Me Too. We're going to bring all of that stuff. Plus when you're alone for a lot of hours at a time, when you get back into a room where lots of people are talking and moving, it's going to be a shock just physiologically, hearing a lot more sound and making a lot more sound. So I think it's going to be quite profound on a number of levels to have theater makers live in a space again and thinking about what theater is, on top of what Sam said, you know, in terms of the technology and all of the things that are available to us. How much will we be masked? How much will we be shielded? Will we be able to touch? All those kinds of things are going to affect how we do our work.
And at Arena, we've already been making a lot of changes because of We See White American Theater and because of changes that we want to make internally too. I mean, the theater has had a long history of diversity and inclusion, and it's not enough. So it's about a third of what we do are around BIPOC artists, and I want to make sure that that number grows rather than recedes in any way. And that includes everybody in all the creative areas of the theater, as well as the administration. And we have a wonderful program called the Alan Lee Hughes program. It's been going for about 28 years. Many, many, many artists have come out of that program and leaders. And what we found within this time period, because of artists who spoke to us, that the pay scale was too low. And that it was causing people to have food insecurity. It was causing them to have housing insecurity. And so we've made that change. So it's a living salary. And we want to make it better for people. And we've now refocused it just on BIPOC leaders. So for me, it's all about action. I mean, there are a lot of things coming out now that are all the vows that people are putting out. And I think it's great to have a vow. We have a vow, but then it's, and everybody wants another and another. And I'm like, let's see where the rubber hits the road. And what are you actually doing as opposed to, I want to do this and I want to, okay, well, that's great. But what are you actually doing? So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
Okay. What has to happen to make us a 51st state? How do we get people on board? Okay, I see David there. David, do we have a few minutes for that last question?
Yes.
Or are we done?
No, we're not done at all, but there's another question that is somewhat more parochial. When will Arena, assuming we can trust Dr. Fauci and it's late summer or whatever, when will we be able to see the RBG play in person instead of live stream? What is Arena's plans for 21-22? Someone asked that question, as you noticed, before the 51st.
Oh, you know, I didn't see it. I was trying to follow questions. Well, we can't tell you when Colleen's play will be completed and ready to go on. And I certainly, by threat of being stuffed in a bag in a closet, would never be able to tell you when we're going to reopen again. Because we have to wait a little bit. But just David and the viewers, just to know, we're in the midst of plans around that. But obviously we have to follow the health recommendations of the city. We're still not into phase 3, right? And so we're still kind of stuck in this area because our numbers, even though they're excellent, they're still too high. So we have to wait until that makes a shift. Now, we did do outdoor work this summer. We brought in Ife Butler for Fanny, and she was absolutely brilliant. And we did it safely. Nobody got sick. So I actually think we're opening churches, we're opening schools, we're opening everything else. And theaters are at the end of the line. It's like, come on, we believe in safety anyway, because we have to have safety for our artists. Our safety booklet is 42 pages long in terms of the kind of safety we want for our audiences, our artists, our staff, everybody. And I think we're churning and burning to get back out there. Okay, so I see this one question. What has to happen to make us a 51st state? How do we get people on board?
Yeah. I'm a huge believer in the power of art to sort of bridge us into our activism. So, you know, share the 51st state, send this film to people. I think that's a first step. And aside from that, it's you know, do what you can do. If you can crawl, crawl. If you can walk, walk. If you can run, run. I think everybody has, there's something that each person can do. And I think it takes a little bit of self-reflection to say, okay, how can I best help this cause? Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And just for people to know, we now have President Biden in. He believes in making Washington, D.C. a 51st state. We now have, with Kamala Harris, our first female African-American, Asian-American VP, which I'm so excited about. You know, she's the tiebreaker. So, and
She
we
went to
have
school here in DC.
at Howard University.
HU,
Hmm.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I think the other thing that's important on the political end is they are going to investigate how January 6th happened and where were the messages sent? How were they sent? How were they missed? What are the structures that are in place to protect the seat of government? And you can't protect the seat of government without having a city that feels empowered to protect itself. So I think this is going to change. As terrible as it was, I think this is going to change the conversation.
I completely agree with you. Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, before you all leave, there's a couple things. I'd like Ellison, Isaac, whoever runs group sales going forward to give us a phone call the minute you know the Ruth Bader Ginsburg play is available, because I think there'll be a block of tickets available. And
No
just
pressure.
no, whenever it is, could be 10 years, take your time. And the interesting thing, by way of detail, is since you're focusing on the 90s, that's the power play designation, there's a lot of interesting stories that didn't make the t-shirts. All the work Marty had to do to get her an interview with President Clinton, why she focused on civil procedure for all those years before she came back to the old RBG, that those of us that studied her when she took cases of the Supreme Court. There's a lot of stuff in there, and yes, the University of Michigan will want a block of tickets one way or the other. I'd like to say thank you for joining us. You promised us a half hour. It's 8:15. I'd like Carlos maybe to put up the closing slide.
Thank you so much, David, for having us. That was a great conversation, Colleen and Sam, and I hope everybody enjoyed the film, and please send it out to your friends.
Thank you.
Thank you for
It's been
having
an
us.
honor to have you guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.